Great. I think it's time. We can get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Xiaoyan Sang, one of the co-chairs of NISIC Continuing Education Committee. I want to thank NISIC Standards Committee for sponsoring today's webinar, Shaping the Future, Getting Involved in Information Standards Committees. Before we get started, I have a few CEC announcements. First, after the webinar, you will be receiving a link to a short evaluation form and a link to the recording and the slides as well. I am adding a few links in chat shortly where you can find the webinar archive on NASIC website. Also, I have some announcements for upcoming webinars. In May, we have 2 webinars scheduled. On May 1st, it isn't a part of a language, self-naming, and endangered peoples in library data. On May 13th, coming to terms in acting reparative change in an urban library OPAC. Registration information can be found on NASIC website. So with that, I will now pass things over to our panelists today.
Thank you. So, welcome. I'm Matthew Truscon, the ASIC Standards Committee Chair. I'm the metadata strategist at Project Muse, a division of Johns Hopkins University Press. Besides using standards on a daily basis, a while ago I also served on a NISO working group called Tracking Link Origins. Today, I'll be emceeing a Q&A session about how to get involved in standards. The ASIC Standards Committee's goals are next slide, are to participate and monitor the activities of standards-related initiatives and organizations such as NISO and Counter, educate and inform NASIC members about the importance of relevant standards, explore and develop opportunities for the NASIC membership to participate in standards development efforts, and provide representatives to outside standards initiatives organizations. We welcome new members. You can email us at standards@nasic.org about how to join, or if you have standards-related questions you would like us to explore. Next slide. We'll start with the introduction for our panelists. Following this, we can have a couple questions that all panelists will address. Subsequently, we can either continue with prepared questions or pivot to live questions from attendees. You're welcome to ask your questions in chat at any time, and peer-to-peer dialogue is also welcome. So let's introduce our panelists. Keondra.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Keondra Bailey. I am one of the standards program managers at the National Information Standards Organization, aka NISO. I also serve as committee manager of TC46 SC9, which is part of the International Organization for Standardization, aka ISO. In my capacity as standards program manager, I work with all our topic committees, working groups, standing committees to get our documents out, get our documents adopted, and basically serve in a overall support role for all of our standards program. Kevin?
Great, thanks, Keondra. Kevin.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kevin Balster. I'm the Continuing Resources Management Team Leader at UCLA. And I've been sort of in this or a similar role for about the past 14 years now. And I've been sort of in that entire time, I've been involved a lot in the program for cooperative cataloging, especially with the CONSER program, so it's the Cooperative Online Serials Program. So I've dealt with a lot of serials cataloging and just cataloging in general over the years, and that's where I've have served on a number of committees there, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the session, and I'll turn it over to Heather.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, I'm Heather Staines. I'm a senior consultant with Delta Think. I've been working in the standards space for a long time. Mainly, I think today I'm going to draw from my experiences with Counter. I'm a former board member and currently serving on the executive committee and the education committee. and I'm a longtime member of the NISO Transfer Committee. I've been with it since it was a UKSG project, and then moved over and became a formal committee. And I'm sure most people on this call know that that is when journals are transferring from one commercial partner or from one non-commercial partner to another. It's certain agreed upon practices to make sure that libraries and researchers don't lose access. And I'll pass it to Bobbi.
Thank you, Heather. Good afternoon to EST time zone participants. I'm Bobbi Patham from Springer Nature, Global Discovery Services Manager, mainly focus on metadata and collaborating with the external vendors like discovery service vendors to make sure our content is easily discoverable. I'm also part of the NISO, KBART, ODI committees, and NASIC standing committees. Thank you.
Okay, first question. How did you get involved in standards committees, or how did you get involved in standards committees or organizations? Shall we start in order, or just anybody wants to? Keondra.
So, how I actually became involved with this particular standards organization, NISO, it ended up being sort of a pipeline. How I started was with the NASIC Standards Committee. In 2019, I think it was 2019 or 18, I joined NASIC, and I decided on a whim to self-nominate for member at large. And to my surprise, I got the nomination and served as a member at large from 2019 to 2022. And the committees that I liaised with were the bylaws committee and the standards committee. So I've been pretty much involved with standards since 2019 single-handedly because of getting my start with the NASIC standards committee.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Keondra. Kevin, same question.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So when I joined UCLA, it's sort of like my first professional job. I think I had the good luck to start working in an institution with a strong commitment to the program for cooperative cataloging. So if you are unfamiliar with that, so it's a program largely run out of the Library of Congress. It's a little weird, the governance there, but there are sort of separate programs depending on, kind of the area of expertise. So there's CONSER, which is the area I am normally involved with. But we have like all of the various programs in the PCC we're a part of, and I have a lot of colleagues there who were working there quite a bit. And so I think just a lot of it was leveraging my connections with my colleagues who are already serving. And then just having that kind of in already. I volunteered to serve on just various task groups and working groups. And there's a lot of PCC programming that I went to, and just was able to kind of get my foot in the door. So there's a lot of networking involved there. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Heather.
Yeah, I think I first became involved in standards in about 2008. I was working for what was then called Springer Science and Business Media. It's now Springer Nature. And prior to that, I had come largely from the print world. So I knew ISBN and I knew ISSN, for series on books. But when I came into Springer, I learned all about DOIs and linking and things like that. And one of the early standards projects I worked on ended up being the espresso recommended practice regarding single sign-on. And from there, I really kind of fell in love with standards. I saw the importance that standards play in the digital world. And I worked a little bit on the Crossmark working group from Crossref, where publishers could update if they had an update or a correction on their content. So those were probably my first introductions. And I was involved heavily with ALA at the time. And so, yeah, from there, I just kind of never looked back.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Bobbi.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, I can start with mine. So in my previous company, I started participating with the transfer working group. My predecessor left the company that time. And that gave me an opportunity. When I joined, I was a little bit nervous, oh my God, what should I do? Should I just listen or like actively say something? And then slowly I got, used to that working group. So that gave an opportunity when I joined Springer Nature, I got involved in the standard committee mainly through my role as a discovery services manager because I work closely with the external vendors. So I built a strong communication and collaboration over the time. So through that opportunity, and again, like my predecessor left, so I got an opportunity to join the NISO KBART committee since 2021. And then since joining, I've been able to contribute to advancing the metadata standards for Springer Nature and participating through the KBART. I have also had a chance to participate since 2018. 2017, I joined Springer Nature. I have also had a chance to participate in the NISO ODA committee, Open Discovery Initiative, where we also worked on and published our conformance statement that's available on the website. And and I've been leading the efforts to prepare the KBART Phase 3, working across the team. So that's pretty much it, and try to implement. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question. How has being involved in standards benefited you professionally? Keondra.
Well, I think the most obvious answer is that it got me a job. Um, so, but to add to that, it's also introduced me to a very wide network within the scholarly communications ecosystem, seeing the dedication that people bring to every single topic committee, working group, standing committee, learning from them. I have a librarian background, so I did work at a university press, but my background is in libraries, so that's what I knew when I was coming to NISO. So it's given me more background on the processes and the workflows and the sheer amount of dedication that goes into publishing infrastructure as well. It has definitely expanded my horizons in many, many ways. I get to go to conferences and meet people. I get to go and work with ISO, which is a whole different beast of itself, learning the ISO directives. So it's definitely expanded my horizons in terms of what actually goes into this world we all work in.
Really interesting. Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I being in an academic library, I think first and foremost, I think being involved in these types of groups, it looks really good for peer review and promotion. So that's, always it's good to have that level of professional involvement. And I think just maybe touching on what Keondra had talked about, it's just like getting involved in these types of organizations. It really can help with professional networking. I mean, just seeing, all of the various groups that are out there and learning about, standards that you may not have even known about. You learn that there are so many things. Like I didn't realize there were like standards on like paper, right? Of like the types of paper. So it's interesting to learn about all of these. And then I think a third one is just it helps to like really learn some standards inside and out. Like I think there have been a couple of cases where, I will like volunteer for some group looking at some standard that I am like maybe vaguely familiar with. Um, but actually, serving on that group really helps you to get a firm understanding of that. I hate to say it, but it's kind of like a fake it till you make it bit there. So you just it's a way of like becoming an expert in a field. So it's kind of saying, you don't have to be an expert at the beginning to even just start on this, right? Like you can kind of come in at a ground level and grow that expertise. Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Heather.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's benefited me in so many ways. That first, single sign-on project I worked on, just coincidentally, I ended up being the only publisher in the working group, and I thought, well, this is impossible. This can't really work. And so I reached out to as many of the larger publishers as I could think of to ask them how many federation integrations they had done for single sign-on. And a lot of the people that I met then, Chris Schillem, who now runs Orchid, he was at Elsevier at the time, Rachel Burley, who heads American Physical Society Publications Division, she was at Wiley at the time. And everyone was so helpful and agreeable and knowledgeable that it really kind of blew me away. So definitely to meet other people who are passionate about the things that you're passionate about. And if you're with a standard for a while, you get to see it go through, its update cycle. So, Bobbi was mentioning a little bit of that. Transfer just recently completed an update cycle. And so you get to go through all of the public feedback, you get to talk it through. A lot of these standards connect libraries and vendors and publishers together. So there's stakeholders from all of those sides, and you can really understand how each one of those is interacting, with the standard, and you get to, provide your input on things, as it goes forward. So I know that there are some companies who are very involved in standards, like EBSCO, I can think is one. I frequently come across people from EBSCO. And then there are other companies, I won't name names, who are less involved in standards. And if something comes out and you didn't really have a seat at the table, it could have some unanticipated impacts on you. So you really do want to try, to be involved and, get ahead of those standards creation and update cycles. So.
Thanks, Thanks all. So attendees, if you want, feel free to ask your question in chat or Q&A at any time. But right now we'll be going on to our third prepare question.
Can
Bobbi
I
didn't get to
respond?
go. Bobbi didn't get to go.
I'm sorry, Bobbi. Okay.
Yeah.
Bobbi, please go ahead.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll make it short. So it opened really many doors for me involved in the standard. So being involved in a standard, it has benefited me professionally in so many ways, I would say. So it given me an opportunity to connect like-minded people, like Heather said, professionals who are passionate about the standards and metadata. And I have really learned a lot through interactions, like even I get to know about Heather, Kevin, Matthew, Keondra, what they are thinking, what are the other standards they are participating, learning so much from them, my peers, professionally. And participating in the committee like NISO helped me to understand of metadata standards and the importance of metadata. I'm also, it gave an opportunity learning, ongoing discussion, what has been shared experiences. And also the other thing I would say is like it opened a door for me to present and participate in panels like this, which has really expanded my professional network. And many connections that I got, it helped me to think really strategically. So when I hear issues from the customers, and I'm able to approach them with the standard based perspective for a better solutions. Okay, we are missing this data. Okay, what are the ways that we can make it available? And there's so many ways I could think, but professionally definitely to help us. So I'm really grateful for these opportunities, for ones that comes on my way, even presentation opportunities, and also the one that I create and participating in the standards. Thank you. Mhm.
Thanks, Bobbi. Apologies for that. Next question. How would you recommend others get involved in standards activities? Keondra.
So my first suggestion would be to uh get involved with NASIC Standards Committee. My second suggestion would be to study the landscape. There are professional organizations that also have standards committees within them. You know, ACRL has a standards committee, IFLA has a standards committee, SAA has a standards committee. So study the landscape, see where, you know, your interests most lie, and start emailing people, start approaching people, start talking to people. I find that standards can be really intimidating to a lot of people. You know, you have these documents that are ranging anywhere from, you know, 14 pages. Whew, that's easy, you know, to what JATS is, the journal article tag suite, that is 830 pages. And so when yeah, when you get into standards, it can feel like it's this area for experts only, and it's not. If you have an interest, the the biggest barrier I see is like finding it intimidating. So you just have to sort of break past that and start asking questions, start talking to people, start researching, start, you know, getting to know where it is you'd actually like to be in this landscape. I feel like a lot of people, especially in the standards world, because there are so many people who have been in it for, you know, it tends to, once people get in the standards world, they stay in the standards world, you know. Um, Ask questions, you know. There is really no question that is too silly. If it is silly, I've asked the question, and, and you quickly find out that no question is silly in this world, because it's years of, you know, multiple revisions of documents. So that would be my first recommendation, to just really push yourself to get out there. And if you have even a passing interest, you're not an expert. You don't need to be an expert. Just go for it.
Thanks, Keondra. Kevin.
Yeah, I think in a similar vein to that, yeah, I'll say I think much of my experience, almost I'd say the entirety of my experience for standards, has been sort of on the cataloging front, especially like within the program for cooperative cataloging. And I think initially too, it can seem very intimidating to kind of get further involved in these groups. So I think yeah, networking as much as possible in the areas where you are sort of maybe involved, maybe not within the standards piece, but just sort of in general. And if there are any like professional development opportunities or conferences or anything like that, just as a way to like reach out and actually meet with people. Because I think oftentimes, you know, even when groups are being put together, you know, it's yeah, it's like if you know the same people who are involved in these standards, right? It's like, okay, you kind of go back to that well. Um, so, you know, just being on someone's radar, right? Of like them knowing you, it helps a lot. It can really help to like be able to get involved with these, because they're only going to, you know, bring in people who they either know or have volunteered or something like that. They're not just going to, you know, pull somebody out of thin air. Um, I think specifically like within the program for cooperative cataloging, I think they have really made efforts recently, I think, to sort of expand the member base and grow the involvement in that. So I would just say if you are currently at a PCC institution, and hopefully you know who you are, I would say was the chair, like I think they've recently started like last year, they'll put out a chair's bulletin every quarter or so, and they have like a feedback form, which is also they have forms for volunteering for various groups, and you can just sort of select any sort of groups whatsoever, and there is a standards committee within PCC. If you are not a PCC institution, I did just want to call out that they have recently started a new program, which is called the Entity Management Cooperative. So this is still sort of it's in an early adopters phase, and they're not accepting members right at this moment. But it's interesting. This is like one of the goals of this group is to lower the barriers to PCC participation. So that might be sort of an in, you know, without doing this like big formal PCC membership. to kind of get involved there. I think the one caveat, it's a bit unclear whether, to do PCC standards work, like you have to be a PCC member, and it's unclear whether, membership in this area will allow for participation, throughout all of PCC, but I think they're sort of aware of that and they're looking into it. But it's kind of like as a good way in for PCC, because I know there have been some barriers in the past. I think it's been largely, the realm of like academic libraries. So I think they're trying to grow that base. Right? And thank
Thanks,
you,
Kevin.
Beth, for adding that link in the chat.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Keondra. I like to add, like, when it comes to reading something like JATS where the documentation is 800 pages, maybe this is obvious, but if this is new to, if a standard is new to you, just read the introduction very carefully, make sense of the sentence, and then just sort of like go through the sections. You don't have to read the whole thing. Just like, what is the section about? And then what's the next section? Okay. And then if you really start getting into it, then you can like know like where to get into it. Sort of like reading a long nonfiction book that you might have been assigned in college a few years ago. And like you really need to know it, just figure out what the introduction says. Okay. And also, Heather asked a question for us to ask you all. Is anyone in our audience already involved in standards? If so, which one or ones? For now, we'll wait for answers to that question. We can go on to our next prepared question.
I would like to add
Okay.
just a quick note to that. So I was just thinking, I would say like start looking at the standards that you are already like working, see what is relevant to your role, and then explore which committees or groups that out there available, what you really care about, like look for those committees and then participate. Just don't overthink, join, get involved, and you'll learn a lot along the way just by participating and listening and your contribution. That's how I started participating, just my experience. Thank you, Matthew.
Great. Thanks, Bobbi. Okay. What kind of specialized knowledge or experience do you need to get involved in standards? Keondra. I think you've
So,
already kind of touched on this, but go ahead.
yeah. So, as I've said before, because standards tend to comprise an area where there is a lot of consensus on, or it's a process of coming to consensus on how a process, a workflow should be best managed to, or best undertaken to, for efficiency. It's an agreement across this is how this process is going to go. Again, it can intimidate people. People can say, well, I've just started in this role, but I'm not sure that I can participate on this working group because I don't have the knowledge yet. If you've even ran into one issue that you've thought, this could be better, you you can be on a working group. That's your knowledge there. Um, as long as you have an idea, that's how a lot of standards and recommended practices start, a simple idea, and then you get chatting. As long as you have bit of a spark, you already have the I and I've only been working at NISO for what this year will be 4 years, but I've seen a lot of groups so far. And as long as you have just even a smidgen of an idea, that is enough of specialized knowledge or experience to start talking to people, to start saying, I think I would like to be involved in creating something that's a bit more firm for the industry to use. There you go.
Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, I think, what the specialized knowledge you need really depends on which standards you're interested in. Some of them are in multiple iterations now and they operate like a well-oiled machine. So it might be a little bit harder to get into some of those than others. You can look to see when a new standards working group is coming together. In the early stages, when we were at NISO Plus back in February, Keondra told us about some of the ones that were, going to be coming along, and you can see if one of those either fits your personal interest or, as Bobbi says, really is relevant, to your role. And it takes lots of different kinds of experience. I was a copy editor, in a previous life, and I can read things for clarity, like, I'm not that technical. Does it make sense to me? How can we make sure that things, are clear to people who read it? Or, some folks are very, very organized and can help organize all of the feedback that comes in from the public feedback period and track which ones have been answered and not, and why. So it's varying, skill sets that kind of come together, to make the magic happen. But you don't necessarily need to be a specialist. In fact, sometimes it's better on those working groups to have a wide range of different experiences, because it's going to be a wide range of different experiences who are using the standards and trying to make sense of it, at the end of the day. So we want to kind of replicate the real world, experience. So keep an eye on, what's coming up for a review cycle, what's coming out that's new, and talk to people in the committees. We're always happy to share our thoughts on that.
Thanks, Heather. What's an example of a recent project that you have worked on as part of a standards committee? Kevin.
Yeah, let me see. So within PCC, I chair, there's an advisory committee for library systems and vendors, and I'll say it isn't explicitly a standards committee, but we did recently put together some guidelines on what we're calling the minimum viable market bibliographic records, sort of largely intended to be used, hopefully by vendors. So we put that together. And then we don't have anything put together yet, but I am part of just a newly established group that is going to be looking at updating. So within Concert, the serials cataloging section within the PCC, a lot of our documentation to get in alignment with official RDA. So for those in the cataloging world, we're doing another big cataloging code switch. So I want to say maybe like the next few years are going to be a prime time to get involved in standards for cataloging, because there's going to be a lot of working and reworking and editing and establishing standards and finding out, oh, that doesn't work, so we need to go back in and do a lot of revisions. So this is sort of like the prime time. It seems like it's going to be for a while to kind of really get involved and kind of really set the path, that we're going to be living on, for the next few years.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Anybody else like to add anything?
I would like to add. So the recent project that I've been involved is my work with the NISO KBART committee, the phase 3. So we are in the final stage of the phase 3, and which is really exciting, and looking forward to its release. And it started 2020. The phase 2 was released in 2014. At the same time, like I've been also working internally to prepare our metadata and technical teams, so we are ready to implement and the new recommendations and collaborate effectively with the discovery service vendors. There's a resource page available at the bottom. Maybe it'll be provided later. So one of the great thing about the phase 3 is that it gives the publishers an opportunity to include additional metadata fields, and which will really help improve content discoverability and also accuracy. So currently we have 25 fields. There's going to be 2 columns will be removed, and then we'll be adding 6 more, so it's going to be 29, and then give opportunity for publishers to include more fields. So overall, it's been a great experience to be part of this, and I'll see, how it comes together, working with the vendors and see how it goes. Thank you, Matthew.
Great. Thanks, Bobbi. Okay, next question. What's an example of how you work to ensure standards are adopted? Keondra.
Oh, wait.
So,
Sorry.
Oh,
I think we actually skipped number 6.
did I really?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So I did. I'm sorry. I'm saying I'm sorry too much here. Anyways, what's a standard or a standard committee that you wish existed? Bobbi.
Unmute myself. Okay, so what is next for standards in publishing? That's what I've been thinking. So one standard or the committee that I wish existed is one of the really focused on the future looking ahead and where standards need to get to go next, something that brings together people to think, about evolving the customer's pain points, and then like especially around discovering the right content. So it would also be great to have a group that actively explore how AI can be used to improve the standards and workflows. How we can, I know NISO has been involved in that one. How we can also make metadata more intelligent and very adaptive. So I'm looking forward to the committee that not just maintaining the current standards, but also predicting what is coming next and how we can help shape the future of the metadata and discovery. So anything that's available, I wish I will, actually participate in that one. Please let me know if anyone knows. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobbi. I see here in chat. Oh, Matthew replied that PCC's NACO and MCO's partnership with OCLC WorldKit entities are things that come to mind that she's been involved with, and that we would love to hear about standards you wish existed too. So please share in the chat. Okay, next question. What is an example of how you work to ensure standards are adopted?
So I'm going to talk about this from the sort of background work. So as part of the NISO publication process, one of the things that we do is that we have a public comment period. It is a 45-day period in which a draft of the document is provided to the community, and the community is allowed to comment on the document and make any suggestions or just give a general thank you. This is one of my favorite parts of the standard and recommended practice creation process because it removes it gives the working group perspectives that they may not have had before, and thus makes the publication of the document much more well-rounded in terms of representing the community. One of the favorite things that we've done at NISO, my favorite thing to do is that sometimes we will have a public webinar during the public comment process. I feel that this is such a wonderful opportunity when we have these public comment webinars. We don't always have them, different reasons, different constraints. But I feel like we do have a public comment webinar. It brings the document that much closer to the community and increases the chances that it will be adopted. So I just wanted to talk about the public comment period and emphasize how important it is, and also just my, my favorite thing about working in this space.
Thanks. Heather.
Well, one of the things that standards really depend upon is awareness. So a lot of the great work that Keondra and her colleagues at NISO do is around that. Um, but when, something new is coming out or when something's going through an update cycle, we'll try to get presentations accepted at conferences. NISO is always really good at having a session reserved at like ALA or one of the other conferences where they'll put the word out and go, who's going? So I often talk about transfer. I sometimes talk about seamless access, which is another access related project that I work on. So we do try to spread the word as broadly as possible. Sometimes we might only be able to get a poster, but we're happy with that, a lightning talk. We will write, blog posts and articles. So when I worked on that single sign-on, I know we did an article in Information Quarterly. We did an article on, I think, research information, the UKSG Insights blog, so again, if you're thinking about your expertise, you might contribute, would you want to be the one who writes that up, or would you want to be the one, who presents that? It doesn't always play out the way that you might hope. The single sign-on project that I worked on, we were doing our little roadshow back in 2009. And what the other thing that happened around 2009 was mobile apps hit everyone. And we had not, in the consideration of that recommended practice, considered the huge shift that was going to take place through access through mobile devices. So we were a little bit kind of on the back burner after that. So you can have, really good intentions and, try to do everything right. And there can be like a slightly external or adjacent thing that happens, that can either delay or end up, entirely turning on its head the way that you think that the standard or the recommended practice, might happen. So never a dull moment in standards.
Thanks, Heather. Bobbi or Kevin, anything to add? Okay. So does anybody have any other questions they'd like to ask us at this time? And if you can either ask them now or feel free to ask us by emailing us at standards@nasig.org. That is a listserv amongst our team, and we are happy to talk amongst ourselves, or perhaps you can be willing to join us at one of our meetings too. Okay, do any of our attendees have anything else they'd like to add at this time?
I'd like to add one thing around counter. At the most recent NISO Plus meeting in Baltimore, we talked a lot about changes that might need to happen with the counter standard because of AI tools and how they're used by researchers and students and everyone. So if you think that standards are like boring things that proceed at the rate of a glacier, or a snail, think about how AI is changing, so many of the things we do. And if you are doing a search and you get an AI summary, that might be good enough for you to answer the question that you were looking for, and you might not need to click through to a publisher website or download a PDF or read a PDF. So how does that impact the metrics that libraries and publishers use to decide on resource subscriptions, and renewals? So it's a huge change and shift. And so how that plays out, lots of brain power is going into that, lots of different scenarios. So if you really want to get involved in like kind of the cutting edge stuff, that kind of stuff affects standards and plays out in standards committees as well. So don't just think that it's going to be a binder on a shelf or a long documentation thing that no one will look at again. It really is going to be relevant, to everybody's daily life and the way that we do our jobs.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Heather. That's that's a standard that I would like to see at some point developed, hopefully sooner rather than later. How scholarly literature is presented in these discovery systems, these AI-based systems, and particularly what are the expectations for platforms sharing content or sharing references, particularly at least link back to the article and attribution. Like those things should probably be a standard in some way. But I don't know. That's what I like to see.
We did have one question
I'm sorry, something.
that Misty Kane had asked, are there standards in the authority space that you wish existed from your experience? I'm not a librarian, so I don't have the widest experience, but I would say I wish there was greater awareness and adoption of ISNI, because from what I know of ISNI, I think it has potential to connect a lot of things together. And like the name of an author versus then when they are the author, I might be messing this up, but like a book that's written, let's say Tom Cruise, the actor, and he has written a book, and there are people have written books about him, and how, all of that connects to kind of make a knowledge graph, that's going to be most useful. So I think, I don't know about gaps in that space, but I think there's room for broader adoption of some of the existing standards that we have. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Heather. And we have an additional question in the Q&A. How do you find out about standards committees?
So for NISO, you basically just have to follow us. We have a newsletter that's linked on our contact page. We also post on Blue Sky, and we also post on LinkedIn. And we also have a listing, and I'm going to link this in the chat, of our active standards committees. So let me post this in the chat. And you can also just email. For all of the groups that I'm involved with, I sort of just searched their website. Like IFLA, for example, I just searched for their standing committee and I contacted someone from it, and their committee is a bit locked down, but yeah, just searching and reading, and I have so many listservs I've subscribed to. They just go straight into a folder so they don't clog my inbox up. But I've noticed that's the best way to, other than, face-to-face interactions, to be to learn what's happening in this landscape.
Bobbi.
Okay. So my final thought is like, I would encourage librarians to follow all these recommended practice by NISO or any other standing committees. And, they play definitely a key role to improve discoverability of, content and access for the users. So if you notice that publisher is not following the standards, and please do not hesitate to reach out to them and report about it, because your feedback is really valuable. It helps us to identify the gaps and also action to take, and so that we can fix it. Even like phase 3 is going to be implemented, right? If something we are missing out, please report to us. So it's like a shared effort that your input makes a real difference in making the content more accessible and also reliable for everyone. And when it comes to the AI and standards, without the standard, data would be definitely, it's messy, right? It's inconsistent, and it's difficult for the AI system to interpret also correctly. And so, do you trust AI? In simple terms, AI, the standards are what make the AI more accurate and trustworthy, if you think so. because better structured data leads to the better insight, so that we can make a right decision or we can trust those data. That's what I believe in. So why this the standards are important for our industry, because it keeps everything consistent and also in a structured way. In a joking way, that I can say that I would say that standards are like a traffic rules for metadata. So without that, everything is going to be crashing, right? And nobody finds anything. So that's why standards are important. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobbi.
Yeah, I would say maybe just kind of piggybacking off of what Heather and Bobby had mentioned, especially I think regarding AI. I think this is going to, I think, be an area with a lot of new development in standards over the next few years, and I think it is going to be coming pretty quickly. I know in the sort of just in the cataloging space, I think PCC has had three or four, just various groups looking specifically at AI. And I think there's probably going to be like splinter subgroups and, in every single area you could imagine. So I think this is going to be an area with a huge impact on, I think, just every aspect of librarianship and just scholarly communication in general. So I think looking I'd say just learning about standards groups and I'm sorry, I'm like trying to tie like five different questions together and I don't know if it's going to go well. It's just like learning about these like groups. I think if there are like other just professional organizations you are involved in, not necessarily like in the standard space, but just sort of going out. If it's like a local or like a state librarians association, things like that. I know the ALA has put out sort of like a big white paper on artificial intelligence that they're looking for feedback on. But I think there's going to be some of these groups like opportunities then probably popping up, to get involved in. So I think there's nothing like a big sea change, in the environment that, it's going to be like a proliferation of new groups to start looking at these, to look at all of these changes.
Thanks, Kevin. These slides will be shared with attendees, and for the most part, most of the slides aren't all that interesting, except our last slide, resources. We have links to NASIC Standards Committee, NISO KBART 3, NISO TC46, EFLA Advisory Committee on Standards, and ACRL Standards Committee. And so those are direct links to where you can find more about the standards and organizations that were referenced in this webinar. Okay, so unless anybody has any other questions, we'll end it now, and thank you for your interest, and feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. I
you,
just have
Ian.
just have a final CEC step to announce. Thank you all the panelists for sharing your insights and experience here. We want to thank NISIC, again, thank NISIC Standard Committee for sponsoring this webinar. And of course, thank you to all the attendees for joining us today. Please share your feedback with CEC by filling out the evaluation form. You should see that right after I close this webinar. You can check out the NISIC website for future webinars, and we hope to see you in one of those in the future. Thanks again. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.